it is a battle being fought in school districts across the country. The central issue, school start times. For years, parents have argued that high school should start later to better align with teens' natural sleep schedules, and that elementary school should start earlier so kids aren't coming home in the dark during rush hour. Here in Boston, they finally decided to do something about it. After unanimous approval by the school committee last week, the city announced changes to the public. It did not go as planned, with more than 80% of start times changing, some by 2 hours or more. The fury from parents was swift. And even among parents whose kids' times are not changing, there's a lot of anger.
It's awful. They're starting at 9:30, which is way too late in the morning for younger children. It's forcing me to not get into work until 10 o'clock in the morning, which is not okay.
At the end of the day, it's a crunch to get your kids to practice or get them home, get them to do their homework and get a meal in them.
Joining me are two more Boston parents, Annissa Essaibi-George, who has 3 kids in the school system and serves as vice chair of the Education Committee in her role as city councilor at large. I should note she's also a former Boston high school teacher. I'm also joined by Dorothy Fennell, who has 1 kid in the Boston schools and another who will be soon. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So, as I understand it, the rationale for what the city is trying to do here is pretty sound. High schoolers will perform better if they go to school later. I know as the parent of someone approaching her teen years that they can be challenging in the morning. And young kids, you want them home when it's not dark as opposed to traveling the roadways. So what is wrong with what this, or what, I shouldn't say wrong, what's problematic about what Tommy Chang and the city want to do here?
Well, if I could just start by saying what's right about this
okay,
change
yes,
is I'm so excited about this move to start high schools later. And the thing that I'm so excited about, Councilor O'Malley and I had worked very hard to push the district to move to where we know high school kids should be, and that's starting after 8 o'clock in the morning, not at 7:15, not at 7:20, not at 7:25. The challenge is that the school committee approved a policy which in its goals that were outset in that policy are great, but unfortunately didn't include what the changes would actually be. And that moves from a handful of our elementary schools to over 24 of our elementary schools to a 7:15 start, and many with a 1:15 end.
Dorothy, from your vantage point, what is frustrating or concerning or difficult to respond to about the changes at the elementary school level?
Well, I want to first say that I agree with Councilwoman Annissa, that yes, the conversation that I followed had been very much focused on where my family was with my now 4.5-year-old, who's essentially in BPS preschool because she's K1, because there's K1 and K2, which is what we know to be kindergarten. And what I would hear is this narrative about high school students starting later. And having been a high school student, I can understand how hard it is to manage everything from getting to school to activities to band, whatever it was. So I'm very happy that's happening. The challenge here is that the conversation is being framed as an either or. We either sacrifice our teenagers, or now in my case, we're sacrificing my 4.5-year-old who does live within a walk zone, but not everybody in her cohort does. Mm-hmm. I think that 7:15 start time for our family, living a little bit more than half a mile away, is that she's supposed to be at school at the time that she's currently waking up. And she's in bed, like many children her age, probably by 7:30. If parents are trying to maximize time with their children in the evenings, because when they get off of work, it's a really hard window to push their bedtime backwards or back later to maximize this. So my challenge is I'm concerned about children who are potentially going to be in school from 7:15 having to arrive at least or get on a bus if they're busing around 6:15, 6:30, and then if they're in after school, they're there until 5:36.
That's a really long day. I know also, by the way, just from a conversation you had with our booker before we got you to come in here, that you're also concerned about families other than yours who might have a harder time rolling with this change if it is put into place, right? Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I mean, to be totally honest, my family has certain privileges in which we can make allowances where my husband's salary can support us. It means that we're not paying down things like my student loan debt. It means that my career is put on hold, but it also means that I'm not paying for after-school care. What I'm concerned about and what I talked about earlier was that you have people that work in a variety of different industries. And I think that Boston as a whole has, for example, I use the medical industry. Some parents I've reached out to have given testimony who can't go tomorrow evening to the school committee meeting at 6 o'clock at the bowling building in Dudley Square. And one person shared with me that she is she's like a pediatric specialty. And I respect and understand the amount of education that went into getting her where she is. And Boston is a city that thrives on their medical care legacy. It's a driver for our economy.
Right. But she doesn't have the flexibility. Right?
Does not have the flexibility. And I'm concerned that it's hard for her because we want her to be able to get her kids to school and pick them up. But also, there's also students in my child's class who are the support system for the medical community, who are doing the janitorial or doing the food service.
Yeah, and I would think in a service position you don't have the flexibility that a lot of white-collar workers have.
Yes. So I have one more question, and that is...
Can you ask the councilor?
I can. I would love to know more information about the proposed letter that BPS suggested that we ask our employers for. It's basically asking teachers for permission.
Dispensation. Okay, yeah.
Can
you answer that? And then I have a couple questions for you.
I think that the letter could be one of the offerings of the superintendent on there's a frequently asked questions about the bell time change, and the superintendent has offered to supply any parent who needs a letter to share with their employer about the bell times. I think when we talk about what we're getting away from in this conversation, just district-wide, city-wide, it's been an unbelievable conversation over the last couple of days,
with
especially.
A lot of but tons of community involvement too.
A lot of community outpouring,
and
we leading up to the bell time change. Yes, so I think there's a lot of conversations that never included a 7:15 start for elementary school times. And what's happened here, and what I've seen from the information I've received both via email and then through conversation with the district, is we are still allowing transportation in our buses to determine what's happening in our schools, what's happening in our classrooms, and what's best for our kids.
Because this is in part predicated on, not predicated on, but one of the benefits is supposed to be reducing transportation costs.
Well, we're reducing transportation costs, but we're creating a great burden, not just for families, but for kids who need to be ready to produce and be active in the classroom at 7:15, and then have a prolonged day, perhaps an after-school care, that not every family can access.
How are the calls to your office running on this right now? Like favorable, unfavorable?
Unfavorable by several miles. But what is unfortunate, and I am a proponent of the later high school start times.
It's been an issue of yours for a while.
It's been an issue since I was elected, since I was campaigning the first time when I lost in 2013. I taught in the Boston Public Schools in high school and know how important it is to get our older kids to school a little bit later. But I also want to say that there have been, I'm an opponent of the 7:15 to 1:15 in particular. That's such a dramatic change for so many of our families. Yeah. But I do want to say, and I said this at one of the parent meetings the other night, there are families that this change has worked for. We have to be sensitive to their needs.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was wondering, in a system this big, I know they did computer modeling with an MIT-affiliated outfit to generate this new plan. Isn't it inevitable?
The dreaded algorithm.
Right.
The dreaded algorithm that we fear has left the voice of a person out.
Isn't it inevitable that if you try to make a huge system-wide change to a great big system, there's going to be some people who are crying foul, even if most others are benefiting?
Well, the day I got into politics, I was told you can't make everyone happy all of the time, and I get that. And there are a number of families that I've run into at the hockey rink, for example, my kids play hockey, that are not happy with the later high school start time. I say you take the adult need out of it, you think about that child first. Later high school start times are the right thing for us to be doing, and I'm so proud we're doing it. It doesn't mean we have to mess things up on the other end, and I believe we've done that.
Quickly, what do you hope happens now, Dorothy?
I hope that the city, or the BPS, and that the mayor call for this process to be halted. I'm very hopeful for this, and that they take a step back, recognize it's the holiday season, and so everyone's trying to finish up their own work in between getting ready for the holidays, and knowing that the fiscal year, or the year is ending, and revisit this and really focus on the community engagement process of it, because I'm hearing so many people tell me or reading through shared emails or Facebook that they were not aware of so many factors of this, or that things weren't translated properly, or that people weren't going to their communities. I think more work can be done.
A freeze and a restart, basically.
Exactly.
All right.
Freeze and a restart and more transparency.
Dorothy Fennell, Annissa Essaibi-George. I apologize for stopping the conversation here, but we're out of time.
We're out of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.